Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
For the past few years, I've been working from home for a nonprofit organization that connects people in need with resources available in their communities. At the same time, you develop a sense for when someone is truly desperate versus when they're trying to manipulate the system. I'm blind, and I'm also an amputee. I live alone and manage my daily life with help from friends and family when I need it. I use screen reading software to navigate all the databases and applications my job requires. Because of my own situation, I have a deep understanding of what it means to face challenges and find ways to work around them. I also have very little patience for people who use disability as an excuse for helplessness. One afternoon, my phone rang with a call that started out sounding genuinely urgent. The woman on the other end was crying before she even finished explaining her situation. She told me she was legally blind and needed a food pantry that would deliver groceries directly to her home. She said her two young daughters had gone to bed hungry the night before. She described how desperate she felt and how she didn't know where else to turn. My heart went out to her immediately. I began searching through my database for delivery options in her county. The problem was that every single delivery service had strict age requirements. You had to be over 60 years old to qualify for home delivery. She was 30. I checked meal delivery programs next, hoping to find an alternative. They all had the same age restriction. I knew her children were in school, which meant they automatically qualified for free breakfast and lunch during weekdays. I suggested she contact the school counselors because nearly every school in our state provides weekend food bags for students from families experiencing food insecurity. Most schools also allow children to take extra items home during the week if there's a demonstrated need. She cried harder and asked if I could personally bring food to her house. She said she wouldn't normally ask such a thing, but she was at the end of her rope. I felt terrible, but I had to explain that delivering food myself wasn't something I was allowed to do through my position. I reached out to my colleagues through our Teams chat to see if anyone had suggestions I hadn't thought of. My manager, who has been incredible since I started this job, recommended trying the office for older adults. She thought they might make an exception to their age eligibility given how extreme the situation sounded. Then my manager asked a question that should have occurred to me right away. How had this woman been getting food and other necessities up until now? I called the woman back and told her about the office for older adults. She immediately said she had already contacted them. I found this suspicious because that resource isn't well known among people in their 30s. I asked whether she had called her daughter's school about the weekend food program. She said she had, and they told her they wouldn't help. I knew that was nonsense. Schools don't refuse help to hungry children when parents ask for assistance with food. Every school counselor and administrator I've worked with takes these situations seriously. I asked her the question my manager had posed. How had she been managing to get food before today? She said her mother gives her groceries when she can get a ride to her house, which was approximately 15 miles away. The second those words left her mouth, she started backtracking. In our first conversation, she had insisted multiple times that she had no family and no friends who could help her. Now suddenly, there was a mother providing groceries. She quickly added that the friend who used to drive her had moved to another state recently. She also said her mother didn't have a driver's license. Then she shifted the conversation entirely and started sobbing about not being able to pay rent next month. She said her husband's truck had needed a repair and it wiped out their budget. I stopped her. This was the first mention of a husband in either of our conversations. I asked why her husband couldn't visit one of the food pantries since he obviously had access to a vehicle. She told me he worked from 4 in the morning until 6 at night. I pulled up my list of food pantries with extended hours. Several stayed open until 8 or 9 in the evening. Others operated on Saturday and Sunday. I offered to give her the addresses and phone numbers for these locations. She rejected the idea immediately. She claimed her husband worked 7 days a week without a single day off, though he barely made any money despite these grueling hours. None of it made sense. First, she was completely alone with no support system whatsoever. Then a mother appeared who provided groceries sometimes. Then a husband materialized who owned a truck and supposedly worked 14-hour days every single day of the week. I asked how many hours per week her husband worked, if he truly worked from 4 in the morning until 6 at night 7 days a week. That would be 98 hours weekly. She hesitated and said she didn't know exactly, but it was a lot. I asked what kind of work required someone to be on the job 14 hours daily without any days off. She stumbled through an answer about construction and how his boss was demanding. I've worked with enough people to know when a story is falling apart. Before I ended the call, she made one final plea. She asked again if I would personally bring her food, maybe just this once. She said she knew it was against the rules, but surely I could make an exception. I told her I couldn't, and I provided her with a complete list of food pantries, school resources, and other assistance programs available to her. I also gave her the number for a transportation service that helps people get to essential appointments and errands for a minimal fee. She hung up sounding angry rather than grateful. I documented everything about the call in detail. I noted every contradiction, every changing story element, and every red flag that had come up during our conversations. My manager reviewed my notes later that afternoon and agreed that the caller had been trying to manipulate me into doing something outside the scope of my job. What bothered me most wasn't just the lying. It was the way she used blindness as a tool to try to guilt me into helping her. She assumed that being blind meant she was helpless, and that I would accept that without question. I know firsthand that being blind doesn't mean you can't solve problems or find creative solutions to obstacles. I navigate my entire job using adaptive technology. I manage my household with a combination of techniques and occasional help from my support network. I've learned to ask for assistance when I truly need it, and to push myself to handle things independently when possible. This woman had multiple options available to her. She had a husband with a working vehicle who could visit food pantries outside of work hours or on weekends if he actually had any time off. She had a mother willing to provide groceries if transportation could be arranged, and I'd given her information about affordable transportation services. Her children's schools would provide breakfast, lunch, and weekend food bags without question. There were at least a dozen food pantries within a reasonable distance from her home. She had resources. She just wanted someone to do all the work for her instead of making any effort herself. After I finished documenting the call, I took a short break before answering the next one in my queue. The next caller was an elderly man who had just been released from the hospital and needed help finding a meal delivery service. He qualified for the age requirement and was genuinely grateful for every piece of information I provided. He thanked me 3 times before we ended the call. That's the difference between someone who truly needs help and someone who's working the system. I moved on with my day, hoping the woman from earlier would actually use at least one of the many resources I'd given her. But something told me she'd just call back another day and try the same routine with whoever answered next. I've been working since I was 16 years old. 3 years of weekend shifts at a coffee shop, late nights, restocking shelves at a grocery store, and now balancing a part-time gig at a campus bookstore with my college classes. Every single dollar I earned went straight into my savings account, minus the stuff I absolutely had to pay for. Phone bill, school supplies, textbooks that cost more than a week's worth of groceries. Sometimes I'd chip in for household stuff when things got tight. I didn't go to parties. I didn't buy new clothes unless my old ones literally fell apart. I didn't get my nails done or go out to eat with friends. While other people my age were posting pictures from concerts and beach trips, I was at home watching free movies on my laptop and packing my own lunches. I wanted to have enough saved up so that when I graduated, I could actually move out and start my life without drowning in debt or crawling back home. $4,000. That's what I had managed to save. It took 3 years of saying no to almost everything fun, but I was proud of it. That money represented my future, my safety net, my way out if things ever went south. One day, my mother asked me for a favor while I was doing homework at the kitchen table. She told me her card wasn't working and asked if I could log into my banking app to transfer money for groceries. I didn't think anything of it. Her card acted up sometimes, and I'd helped her before. I pulled up my app, navigated to the transfer screen, and tilted my phone toward her so she could see. That's when she saw it. The total balance sitting at the top of the screen. She went completely silent. I watched her eyes lock on to that number, and something shifted in her expression. She didn't say anything right away, just told me how much to transfer and walked away. I should have known something was coming. That night, she knocked on my bedroom door around 10. I was getting ready for bed when she came in and sat on the edge of my mattress. Her arms were crossed, and she had that look on her face that meant she'd been thinking about something for hours. She said we needed to talk about my savings. I asked her what about them. She pointed out that I had $4,000 just sitting there. I told her, yeah, that I've been saving for 3 years. She reminded me that I was living there without paying rent, eating the food she bought, and using the electricity she paid for. I felt my stomach drop. I told her I paid for my own stuff like my phone, my school things, and groceries sometimes. She said that wasn't the same as contributing to the household, and that at 19 years old, I should be helping more. I said I helped when she asked me to. She called me selfish for hoarding money while she was out there struggling to keep the place running. She said I was living under her roof and the least I could do was help my family. I pointed out that we weren't in crisis and that she worked full-time. She asked if I knew how much it cost to run the house and how much she sacrificed so I could go to college. I reminded her that I was paying for college myself with loans and my job. She didn't like that. Her face hardened. She told me she needed $2,000 from me for the family and that I could always earn it back. The number hit me like a slap. $2,000. Half of everything I had saved. Half of 3 years of work. I told her I couldn't do that. She asked if I meant I couldn't or I wouldn't. I explained that the money was for emergencies and for when I moved out that I needed it. She called me ungrateful and said she'd given me a place to live and food to eat, and this was how I repaid her. She said I was acting like some tenant instead of her daughter. I tried to explain that I wasn't trying to be ungrateful, that I just worked really hard for that money. She said she worked really hard every single day to provide for me and asked if I was too selfish to understand that family helps family. She left my room before I could say anything else. I sat there staring at the wall, feeling like I've been punched in the chest. The next day, I started getting texts. My aunt, my uncle, even my grandmother, all of them saying the same thing. My aunt texted that my mother had told her I refused to help, and that it was really disappointing. My uncle said family came first and that I should be ashamed. My grandmother wrote that when she was my age, she gave everything to her parents and that this generation was so selfish. None of them asked for my side. None of them questioned why my mother suddenly needed $2,000 the same week she saw my bank account. They just assumed I was in the wrong. I felt trapped. Every time I walked past my mother in the house, she'd make some comment about how she couldn't believe she raised someone so cold. She stopped talking to me unless it was to guilt me. My relatives kept calling, kept texting, kept pushing, but I didn't give in. 2 weeks later, my mother got a call from my grandmother. My uncle had asked my grandmother for money around the same time my mother asked me. My grandmother mentioned it to my aunt, who mentioned it to my mother. My mother came into my room that evening looking uncomfortable. She said she'd talked to my grandmother that day. I said, okay. She told me that my grandmother had said my uncle asked her for money too for a new TV. I didn't say anything. She admitted she didn't actually need the money and that she just thought since I had it, I should share it. She left without apologizing. My relatives stopped texting. My grandmother called me a week later and told me she was proud of me for standing my ground. I still have my $4,000, and I'm counting down the days until I can use it to leave. I've been living in Meadowbrook Estates for 15 years when the previous president stepped down. Nobody else wanted the job, so I volunteered. The position meant paperwork, monthly meetings, and sorting out disputes over lawn height and paint colors. What I didn't expect was inheriting a board member who treated our community funds like her personal spending account. She'd been on the board for 3 years before I took over. Everyone thought she was dedicated. She volunteered for everything, pushed for neighborhood improvements, and nobody questioned her motives. By the time I became president, she'd moved up to treasurer. That should have warned me something was wrong. Things started going sideways about 2 months into my term. Residents kept complaining that approved repair requests weren't getting funded. The community pool renovation we'd all voted for kept getting pushed back because she claimed we didn't have the budget, even though our quarterly reports showed plenty of money in reserve. I decided to look closer at where our money was actually going. When I asked for detailed account breakdowns, she kept putting me off. She promised to bring everything to the next meeting, then show up with excuses about computer crashes or lost files. After the third time, I stopped asking her and went straight to the bank myself. What I found made me sick. She'd been writing checks to herself for 2 solid years. Small amounts at first, a couple hundred here and there marked as supply reimbursements for things she never bought. Then the amounts got bigger. I counted close to $30,000 she'd stolen from our association. I spent 3 full days tracking every transaction, matching them against receipts, building an airtight case. The evidence was impossible to ignore. I called an emergency board meeting. 5 of us met at the community center conference room where we always held our monthly meetings. I put security cameras in that room 6 months back after someone spray painted the building, and I'd made sure everyone knew those cameras were there and recording. She showed up 15 minutes late looking annoyed. I thanked everyone for coming on short notice and told them I'd found some major problems with our finances that we needed to handle right now. Her face went white, but she recovered fast. She asked what problems I was talking about. I spread the bank statements and canceled checks across the table. Every board member leaned forward to see. The room went dead silent except for papers rustling. I explained that these were checks she'd written to herself over 2 years and that none of them matched any real association expenses. She said that was insane and claimed those were all reimbursements for stuff she'd paid for herself. I told her that if that was true, she'd have receipts. She said she didn't keep receipts for every little thing and claimed this was obviously a setup. She accused me of framing her because I'd never liked her. She jumped up and pointed at me across the table. Her voice got louder with every word. She said I'd wanted her off this board since I started and that this was completely made up. She claimed I probably faked these documents myself. I told her that the cameras in this room were recording everything she was saying. I pointed out that she was accusing me of faking bank statements and framing her. I asked if that was really what she wanted on record. I pointed at the 2 cameras mounted in opposite ceiling corners. Her eyes followed where I was pointing. All the color drained out of her face and didn't come back. The other board members voted her off immediately and agreed to report her to the police. She grabbed her purse and left, slamming the door hard enough to shake the windows. I figured that was that. File the police report, let the courts handle it, and start fixing the damage she'd done to our finances. 2 days later, my phone rang at 6 in the morning and it was another board member who lived near the train tracks, running along the east side of our neighborhood. He told me to turn on the news right now. I grabbed the remote and switched to the local station. The morning anchor was covering a freight train collision. My stomach dropped when I recognized the location. The reporter stood near the tracks bordering our community, and behind her I could see a car that had been completely destroyed by the train. The reporter explained that the vehicle was deliberately placed on the tracks early that morning. She said witnesses saw a woman park the car, lock it, and run away on foot minutes before the train arrived. The reporter added that the train operator tried to brake but couldn't stop in time. She mentioned he got minor injuries and was treated at the scene. Then she said the car belonged to the president of the Meadowbrook Estates Homeowners Association. My car. She'd stolen my car and used it like some kind of insane barricade. I ran outside in my pajamas to check my driveway. Empty. I'd left it unlocked the night before after bringing in groceries. Police showed up at my door within an hour. I told them everything about the embezzlement, her removal from the board, and the recording of her threatening me. They'd already identified her from security footage at a gas station where she'd stopped after ditching my car on the tracks. She got arrested that afternoon trying to get on a bus 3 towns over. The charges stacked up fast: embezzlement, grand theft auto, criminal mischief, reckless endangerment, and destruction of property. The railroad company sued her for damages to their train and the cost of shipping delays. I sued her for my destroyed vehicle. The Homeowners Association sued her to recover the stolen money plus legal fees. Her lawyer tried claiming temporary insanity, but the prosecution showed the security footage from our board meeting. It proved clear planning. She knew exactly what she was doing when she made those threats, and she knew exactly what she was doing when she stole my car and parked it on those tracks. The judge gave her 8 years in prison. Between the criminal restitution, the civil judgments, and her legal fees, she'll be paying off debt for the rest of her life. The association got most of the embezzled money back through asset seizures and insurance claims. I bought a new car and now I lock it every single time without exception. I also made sure our new treasurer understood that every expense would be documented, verified, and audited regularly. Our community learned an expensive lesson about trusting the wrong person with money. The train company eventually billed her for $68,000 in repairs and lost revenue. She'll be an old woman before she ever pays off half of what she owes. The train operator recovered from his injuries, but he sued her too for medical bills and trauma. That added another $12,000 to her debt. Every time I pull into my driveway now, I remember that morning I walked outside and found my spot empty. Some people handle things by taking responsibility. Others decide to make everything worse. By doing something so reckless, it lands them in prison for years. She chose the second option, and now she's paying for it in ways she never imagined when she wrote herself that first fraudulent check. The new board runs tight financial controls now. 2 people sign every check. We audit our accounts monthly instead of quarterly. We post all expenses online where every resident can see them. Nobody will ever steal from this community again. Not on my watch. My grandfather was everything to me. He taught me how to ride a bike when I was 6. He helped me with my math homework after school. When I got accepted into college, he cried actual tears of joy. So when he called me during my sophomore year and said he had arranged an internship for me at his law firm, I almost dropped my phone from excitement. My grandfather was a partner at a small real estate law firm. He had been there for over 30 years and basically kept the whole operation running. Everyone respected him. Everyone trusted him. And now I was going to work there too. I showed up on my first day 15 minutes early. I wore my best business casual outfit. I had my notebook ready. I smiled at everyone I met. The office was smaller than I expected, just a handful of people working in a cramped space with outdated furniture and a coffee maker that looked older than me, but I did not care. This was my chance to learn. This was my chance to make my grandfather proud. The woman who was supposed to train me introduced herself as one of the senior partners. She was probably in her 60s with short gray hair and reading glasses that hung on a chain around her neck. My grandfather had mentioned her before. He said she was brilliant. He said she worked harder than anyone he knew. He trusted her completely. I will call her Karen. Karen gave me tasks right away. Filing, copying documents, answering phones, organizing client folders. I did everything she asked without complaint. I stayed late when she needed something done. I came in early to organize files. I never said no. I never pushed back. I was diligent. I was punctual. I was exactly what I thought an intern should be. My grandfather would stop by my desk sometimes and ask how things were going. I always told him everything was fine because I did not want him to worry. He would smile and tell me he was proud of me. Those moments made everything worth it, but something felt off. Karen barely spoke to me unless she was giving me an assignment. She never asked how I was doing. She never checked if I understood what I was learning. Sometimes I would hear her laughing with the other employees in the break room, but when I walked in, the conversation would stop. I tried to be friendlier. I tried to join conversations, but it never seemed to matter. 3 months into my internship, Karen called me into her office. She sat behind her desk with her hands folded. She did not smile. She told me they were going to have to let me go. I felt my stomach drop. I asked her what happened and if I had done something wrong. She said it was nothing like that and explained they were just too busy right now to provide me with the proper training I needed. I told her I had been there for 3 months and thought I was doing well. She said I was fine, but it just was not working out. I asked her to give me more details and if there was something I could improve. She said that if she was being honest, I needed to be more talkative. She said I was too quiet around the office. I stared at her. I had been quiet because I was working. I had been focused because I wanted to do a good job. And now I was being fired for not chatting enough. I told her I could work on that and begged her to give me another chance. She said she was sorry, but the decision had already been made. I asked if my grandfather knew about this. She said they would handle that conversation themselves. That was it. No real explanation, no second chance. Just out the door, like I had never mattered at all. I drove home and cried in my car for 20 minutes before I could pull myself together enough to go inside. When I told my grandfather, he was furious. He made calls. He demanded answers. He asked why they would do this to his granddaughter. But it did not matter. Karen and the other partners stood by their decision. They told him it was a business decision and nothing personal. My grandfather stopped talking to Karen after that. He started looking into retiring early. He said the firm was not what it used to be. A few months later, my grandfather passed away from a heart attack. The firm sent flowers to the funeral. Karen gave a speech about how much she respected him. I stood there and said nothing. When he died, I tried to move on. I finished college. I got a job somewhere else. But I could not forget what Karen had done to me. I could not forget how she had dismissed me so easily after everything my grandfather had done for that firm. Then one day I was scrolling online and decided to look up the firm. That is when I saw they had reviews. Most of them were decent, but there was one single, one-star review from a former client who said they mishandled paperwork and cost him thousands of dollars. I kept reading and then I remembered something. One of my tasks when I worked there had been helping Karen write fake 5-star reviews. She had literally asked me to sit at her computer and post glowing feedback to bury the bad review. She dictated what I should write. She made me use different names. She told me it was just part of business. I remember feeling uncomfortable about it at the time, but I did it anyway because I wanted to keep my job, or so I decided to write my own review. An honest one. I detailed my experience as an intern. I mentioned how they let me go without real cause. I talked about the fake reviews. I mentioned that my grandfather had been a partner there for over 30 years and how they treated me after he helped build their reputation. I made it specific enough that anyone reading would understand this was not some random complaint. This was real. A week later, the review was gone, deleted. So I wrote another one, and this time I added more details. I mentioned the outdated office. I mentioned the dismissive attitude. I mentioned how they asked me to write fake reviews to hide legitimate complaints. I mentioned everything I could remember. Gone again. Now it has become a game. Every time they delete my review, I write a worse one. I make sure it is honest. I make sure it is specific. I make sure people reading it will think twice before hiring this firm. I have written about how they lack proper training programs. I have written about how they prioritize appearance over competence. I have written about how they discard people the moment they become inconvenient. My latest one lists everything wrong with the company from top to bottom. And at the very end, I added a little message. Hi, Karen, followed by a smiley face. Is it petty? Absolutely. But I will keep doing it. Every single time they delete it, I will write another one. Because they took something from me, they took my opportunity. They disrespected my grandfather's memory. And Karen had the nerve to act like she cared about him when she fired me without a second thought. She stood at his funeral and talked about what a great man he was. She shook my hand and told me how sorry she was for my loss, but she never once apologized for what she did to me. So eat crap, Karen. I grew up sharing everything with my younger sister. Clothes, rooms, toys, you name it. That was fine when we were kids. But once I turned 18 and started working full-time at a local warehouse, I realized I needed something that was actually mine, something I earned on my own. It took me 3 years to save up enough for a decent used car. I worked double shifts some weeks, skipped going out with friends, ate cheap meals at home. Every paycheck went straight into my savings account. When I finally bought that car at 21, it felt like the biggest accomplishment of my life. It was a blue sedan, nothing fancy, but it was mine. I paid for the insurance every month. I covered the oil changes and tire rotations. I filled the tank with my own money. My sister was still in high school when I got the car. She would ask to borrow it sometimes for school events or if she needed to get somewhere important. I always said yes because I wanted to be a good older brother. I remembered what it was like being her age and not having reliable transportation. Our parents both worked long hours and could not always drive us around, so I figured I was helping her out. Then she turned 21 and things changed. She was not in school anymore, just working part-time at a coffee shop and spending most of her free time hanging out with her friends. She started taking my car more and more often. At first, it was once a week, then it became 3 times a week, then almost daily. She would not even ask anymore. I would wake up in the morning to get ready for my shift and realize my keys were gone. I would check the driveway and the car would not be there. She would come back hours later, sometimes not until after I had already left for work, using a ride share that I had to pay for out of pocket. The gas situation made it even worse. She would take the car with a full tank and bring it back running on fumes. I started keeping track and realized I was filling up the tank twice as often as I used to. That was an extra $100 a month, sometimes more. Money I did not have to spare. One night she took the car to meet her friends at some restaurant across town. I had to be at work early the next morning and needed the car to get there. She did not come home until past midnight. When I went outside to check, the gas light was on. I was furious. The next morning I confronted her while she was eating breakfast in the kitchen. I told her we needed to talk about the car. She asked what about it in a dismissive tone. I explained that she could not keep taking it whenever she wanted without asking me first, and that she needed to start putting gas in it when she used it. She acted shocked and asked if I was serious. She said it was just a car, like it was no big deal. I reminded her that it was my car and that I paid for everything. Insurance, gas, maintenance, all of it came out of my paycheck. She rolled her eyes and said I was being so stingy. She could not believe I was acting like this over a few dollars of gas. I tried to explain that it was not a few dollars. She had been using it almost every single day and I asked if she knew how much that cost me. She fired back saying she needed to get around too and that she had a life. She accused me of acting like a parent and said it was really annoying. I told her I was not trying to be a parent, but that I was trying to set a boundary. This was my car and I worked hard to afford it. She scoffed and said, "Wow, so much for being a supportive brother." She thought I cared about her freedom and her ability to live her life. I told her plainly that her freedom was not my financial responsibility. She rolled her eyes and walked away. I thought maybe that conversation would change things. It did not. She kept taking the car. She kept bringing it back with no gas. She kept acting like I was the one being unreasonable. I started hiding my keys in different places around my room, under my mattress, in my closet, inside a shoe. She always seemed to find them. I felt like I was going insane. Then she went to our parents and told them I was being dramatic and controlling. They sat me down one evening after dinner. My dad said my sister told them I was refusing to let her use the car. I explained that was not true and that I just asked her to fill up the gas tank when she uses it and to ask me before taking it. My mom said she was telling them I was treating her like a child. I corrected her and said I was treating her like someone who did not respect my property. I pay for that car. Every single expense. My dad told me we needed to learn to share because we were family. I reminded him that I had been sharing for months and that she had not contributed a single dollar toward gas or anything else. My mom sighed like I was being difficult. That was when I realized they were not going to back me up. I was on my own with this. I decided to take more drastic action. I went to a locksmith and had a new set of keys made. I kept one set on me at all times and hid the spare in a locked safe in my room. I did not tell anyone about it. The first morning she could not find the keys. She came into my room furious. She demanded to know where the keys were. I told her that I had them. She said she needed the car. I asked her what for. She said she was meeting friends for brunch. I told her that was not an emergency and that she could take the bus. She called me unbelievable. She stormed out and slammed the door. I felt guilty for about 5 minutes. Then I remembered all the times I had to scramble to get to work because she took my car without asking. The guilt faded. A week later, she got a ticket for running a red light in my car. The ticket came in the mail addressed to me since the car was registered under my name. $250. I confronted her immediately. I told her she got a ticket in my car. She said it was an accident with barely any remorse in her voice. I told her she was paying for it. She said she did not have that kind of money right now. I said then she should not have run a red light and that she was paying for this or she was never using my car again. She tried to argue, but I did not budge. I told her she had 2 weeks to come up with the money or I would take her to small claims court. She called me petty. She called me cruel. She cried to our parents again, but I did not care anymore. 2 weeks later, she handed me the money in cash. She has not asked to use my car since. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.